Welcome back to the Play by Play podcast. On today's episode, we are going to be doing part one to a two-part video series of either side of the NBA Finals this year. This episode, we're going to be going over the Oklahoma City Thunder, their path to making it to the NBA Finals, how they could potentially win this, and most of all, the question I want to answer today is, where does this 2025 Oklahoma City Thunder team potentially rank amongst all-time level teams? Really quick before we get started, if you are watching this on YouTube, please feel free to subscribe, leave a like, and comment down below, as well as share with your friends. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of the ads are going to be down below, and on all those social medias, you will get to see my reaction to instant breaking news from the NBA and the NFL, as well as always be notified for when the podcast uploads an episode. And with the NBA Finals around the corner, the NBA draft, NBA offseason, NFL training camp kicking off, there's going to be a ton of content that is going to be pumped out both on the YouTube channel and on the social media. So make sure that you are followed up and caught up with everything. And without further ado, let's not waste any time. Let's get into it. So as of right now, the Oklahoma City Thunder sit at 80 total wins on the season. That is 12 total for the playoffs, and obviously 68 on the regular season. They went 68-14. In my eyes, there is no doubt that they were the best team in the league this year, even over a team that had so much championship pedigree and experience like the Boston Celtics, who had big time, superstar players like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. The Oklahoma City Thunder were dominant this year, and they did it in a very unconventional sort of way. I think that it's been a very long time. If not, we've never seen a team that has been constructed this way, a team that has the potential to go 8, 9, 10, potentially even 10 plus deep on their roster. This is a squad that has potentially two potential starting five type lineups on their team. And even the eighth, ninth, 10th man on the roster continues to show up and make big plays. I mean, just to go over this lineup, you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, you have Cason Wallace, Lou Dort, Isaiah Hartenstein, Chet Holmgren, J-Dub, Alex Caruso, Kenrich Williams, Aaron Wiggins, and plenty more. And that's not even talking about the multitude of draft picks that they have coming up in the later years. That's not even discussing guys like Nikola Topic, who haven't even gotten an opportunity to play this year, part because of injury, but also part because this roster is so stacked. Isaiah Joe, I didn't even mention him. And these are, once again, all guys that are performing at high levels. Isaiah Joe was one of, if not their best shooters this year. He comes straight off of the bench. Aaron Wiggins and guys like Kenrich Williams are solid, big-time 3-and-D players that could potentially start on certain rosters within the league. They're coming off, later on in the bench, right? You have guys like Cason Wallace, Lou Dort, and whatnot, who I think are still guys, especially Cason Wallace, who have, all-star type of potential. He is that young and he has shown that much promise that he could take that extra step. And even a guy like Chet Holmgren, who really I think hasn't even unlocked his full potential from what we believed him to be back when he was drafted in, I believe, 2021. I mean, he still hasn't really added any size onto his frame. I think that his three-point shot could definitely get a lot more consistent. He could definitely get better banging down low, being physical down low on the block, and blocking shots as a rim protector. I mean, that's a guy that could really upgrade his game. And to end this all off, this Oklahoma City Thunder team has done it around a very unconventional superstar in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The reigning MVP has, installed a very interesting play style, right? He's a 6'6" point guard who consists a lot of his game around driving to the basket and getting free throws, around bullying smaller guards behind him on the block and scoring out of the post. That's Shai's game. His game doesn't revolve around, shooting the basketball very well, like we've seen from guys like Steph Curry. His game doesn't revolve around really like, being a pick and roll savant, getting out in the pick and roll and playmaking and making shots for his teammates, like we've seen with like a Chris Paul in the past and whatnot. It's virtually a slashing wing almost at the point guard position who's able to get to the hole at will and then make shots from the free throw line. Now, I'm not going to discuss all of the talks about him being a free throw merchant and all this controversy around because I have addressed that in previous episodes. So go ahead back and look at that, especially the conference finals previews that I did. I went, in depth into that conversation. but it is a style that has worked. And in all of this for the Oklahoma City Thunder, having this unconventional type of lineup style, having this unconventional superstar, they've done it in a very unconventional way as well, which is basically building up a multitude of draft picks, 10, 15, 20 future draft picks, and also doing it through trades. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was made through a trade. Let's not forget he was made through a trade where the Thunder originally were looked at as the losers potentially, which was trading Paul George away to the Los Angeles Clippers and getting SGA out of that trade. And he's really flourished and been able to develop. Obviously, drafting guys like Cason Wallace and Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe and developing all those guys, they've really built this roster from the ground. And they've done it in ways that we've continuously seen from teams in the past. I mean, the Boston Celtics, their two superstars were built from the ground up. Denver Nuggets, that whole team was virtually drafted, and even the pieces that they got out of trades were from players that they drafted. Aaron Gordon, for example, they drafted Gary Harris, who was in that trade, and some other pieces that were within that trade as well. Monte Morris, that was in that Aaron Gordon trade, he was drafted as well. You look back at 2021, Milwaukee Bucks, they had Chris Middleton, they had Giannis Antetokounmpo. They drafted their big time pieces. They didn't just go out and get them in trades. And slowly but surely, I think, though, not to go off topic, but we've seen these super teams within the past, these super teams where you sign on big free agents, where you make big time trades for the top players of the time. I think that we've seen those teams really start to plateau and potentially even dip in the quality of going out and winning a championship. I mean, just off the top of my head, off of recency, you got like the Brooklyn Nets with Harden, Kyrie, Kevin Durant, who really were only together for a year and a half, and never ever had big time success in making it to the finals. You had the Clippers, who had Kawhi, PG, James Harden, Russell Westbrook. That team didn't work out. A lot of that was potentially due to injury, but that didn't really work out. Sixers, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler, Joel Embiid, JJ Redick, all that. That team didn't work out. You want to go to stick on James Harden? You had Harden with Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook. That didn't really work out. And so slowly but surely, we're beginning to see this style of team building where you're drafting, you're making trades, but you're making it for you're trading your superstars for people who have a lot more potential and that you could potentially develop. And we're seeing a lot more of a developmental side towards building your roster, and it has worked out. Denver Nuggets, we mentioned it, Nuggets built their roster from the ground up. Celtics, you now have both the Thunder and the Pacers, who we're going to get to talking about in tomorrow's episode, also pretty much built that team from the ground up, and with high risk, high reward type trades and whatnot. And you're starting to see smaller markets begin to flourish. This finals is going to be unprecedented. It was big time unexpected. Indiana versus OKC, these two very, very small markets, where when on the opposing side, we see teams like the Miami Heat, the Chicago Bulls. I know that's particularly in the East. We're seeing teams in the West, even legendary teams like the San Antonio Spurs slipping down the record books a little bit and starting to get into a little bit of this plateau. And you're seeing the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? The Oklahoma City Thunder, even a team that sure has gotten big time players but hasn't had a lot of success. The Houston Rockets, the Indiana Pacers, the Denver Nuggets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, all of these smaller market teams, their style of team building is beginning to really pay off, and they're beginning to really flourish. But enough about that. Resuming back to OKC, the big question here is, how do they get over the finish line and win this series? Because don't get me wrong, they're the favorites right now. They are the big time favorites. They ousted Minnesota in 5 games within that series. Pretty easily handled a pretty solid Minnesota team, and they did it through an amazing strategy of just using their length and their perimeter defense to just swarm Minnesota defensively, especially within that paint, and give them nothing down within the 5 feet mark around the rim. They were able to execute that, and they were able to execute also with not a lot of great transition offense. They were able to do it in much of a half court setting, relying on SGA, relying on their great shooters, relying on their defense to make turnovers that ends up turning into points on the other end. That's how they were able to execute that. And in this series, they're going to have to do more of the same. And I think that they're going to have a pretty easy time doing that, because they match up well against a lot of teams within the NBA. And I think against Indiana, they match up well as well. You could easily have, Lou Dort, Casey Wallace, Isaiah Joe, or SGA guarding, Halliburton and Nembhard in the backcourt. You could have potentially SGA or Lou Dort going head to head with Aaron Nesmith on the wing. You have J Dub to take care of guys like Obi, to take care of energy guys like Obi Toppin, right? Like Quay Walker that comes in at that 4 spot for Indiana. And you also have big time bigs and big time hustling bigs like Isaiah Hartenstein. We mentioned Chet Holmgren to go up against Miles Turner. So on a 5-on-5 basis, I think that they really match up very well. Not to mention the fact that in the 2 games they played against Indiana this year, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had amazing performances. I remember looking at it, I think that there was one game where he scored 33 points. The second game he scored 45. And it makes sense because Indiana doesn't have a big time matchup to go up against SGA. Again, the size is a really, really big problem. His ability to beat you off the dribble at will is a really, really big problem. And with, Tyrese Halliburton being a little bit undersized, with Nesmith probably going to have to deal with more of the wing side of things, them really just relying on guys like, potentially Ben Shepherd and Andrew Nembhard. I'm not sure if that's enough to get across to really stop SGA. So what Indiana's really going to have to do, and again, I'm going to talk about this a lot more in depth in tomorrow's episode, is they're going to have to block off SGA on the block a lot, using Miles Turner and Obi Toppin's rim protection to the best of their abilities. But I'm not sure if that's a sustainable way, and because of that, the only thing that really concerns me with OKC is, can they control the tempo? That's where Indiana really was able to get Cleveland. And I was wondering in that Cleveland series, how the heck is Indiana winning these games? They're so easily, really, against the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, but they continue to play at that fast pace. And even in this past series against the New York Knicks, again, we'll talk about this a lot in tomorrow's episode, they continuously were able to be on the run. There were some moments where the New York Knicks would score a basket. Pascal Siakam would or Tyrese Halliburton would grab the rebound. They would throw it down to Pascal Siakam. He would catch it, score a layup. They would throw it down to Obi Toppin. He would catch it, score a dunk. And New York barely had any time to really react and get down the court and be able to stop that. That's how fast-paced the turnovers that they were getting. Unlike OKC, they were able to turn it into fast break points to get down the court easily and just score easy layups. That was their game. So the question for the Thunder is, can they make it more into a half-court offense type of play? Because if they could slow down the pace in this series, you have to remember that they have the number 1 rated defense within the league and within the playoffs right now. They have a 104 defensive rating, the best within the playoffs as of right now. They commit the least amount of turnovers, which is because they play at a much slower, more sophisticated, more mature pace than maybe somebody like Indiana does. If they can turn it into that type of game, Indiana, in my opinion, doesn't have as mature of an offense to really be able to take that. They make a lot more mistakes. They don't play as well as they don't have as well of a well-rounded defensive game. And while their offense is better technically by offensive rating than OKC, it's very, very, very marginal. And like I mentioned, OKC I think matches up better in terms of size, in terms of length, against Indiana offensively to be able to create shots. So the big thing for OKC is, can they control the pace? If they can, I see this being a very, very easy series for them. I'm talking about potentially 5 games, if not maximum in 6, potentially even a sweep. Like they have been so dominant within the paint and guarding on the perimeter that it demoralizes you offensively. And I think that with that type of momentum that they can get on their side, 4, 5, like I said, maximum 6 games in this series, potentially for OKC, which brings me to the question. This is all going to be likely answered through this playoff series, and that is, how good is this Oklahoma City Thunder team? Can you match them up all time against some of the all-time best teams? Like we mentioned, 80 wins. That's some of the best all time. That ranks high amongst a lot of different teams. Just looking up against championship teams, how many championship teams that won in the past can you put this team against with their play style, with their length, with their defense? 2024 Boston, I'm not going to lie, it might sound like recency bias, but I'm going to favor OKC. 2023 Denver, I just don't know if 2023 Denver has enough defensively to go up against OKC. But Jokic was still playing at a very high level. Jamal Murray, very, very high level. You also had, I think that they had a lot more depth on that Denver side. They did play probably a little bit better defense. Maybe I'll take Denver. 2022 Warriors. That's a toss-up to me, but maybe because of the experience Golden State, but as a talent-wise, as just the length, the youth that they have, I think that OKC could make that a 50-50. 2021 Milwaukee, I think I'm taking this OKC over them. 2020 Lakers, again, a 50-50 series. You could even go back in time, 04 Pistons, the way the with how versatile Oklahoma City is able to match up against these big teams, I honestly do think that you could make a case against the 2004 Pistons for OKC to take that. 2011 Mavericks, potentially, I think it's there. I think it's really a 50-50 series. Obviously, when you look at like the 90s Bulls, the mid 90s Rockets, the early 2000s Lakers, even late 2000s Lakers with like Kobe and Powell and whatnot, those I think they're a little bit outmatched. But against some of the championship teams, I do think that you could really put them against them. Maybe, the 1999 Spurs with a young Tim Duncan, an older David Robinson. Could they go up and beat that team? Potentially. Like I said, just with how well they do on the perimeter, with their way to scheme down in the paint to make it so much more difficult for you, right? With their ability to match up against anyone, whether you want Lou Dort, Casey Wallace, Isaiah Joe, SGA, Aaron Wiggins, Kenrich Williams to match up against anybody on the floor. They have the double big, on the backside, on the block to be able to defend there. Jalen Williams is a great complement to SGA. He brings some real energy. He's able to attack the rim. He's improved his 3-point shot. Like, this team is so freaking talented. And sure, like I said, against the cream of the crop, against the 90s Bulls, against the 2010s Warriors, especially with Kevin Durant, against the mid 90s Rockets, against older teams like the 80s, Celtics and Lakers, maybe they're not at that point, but I think that they're right behind those squads with just the depth and the amount of pure talent that they have. And I would take them over, I think, half, if not majority, of the recent champions from 2019 onwards, and against a couple older champions. Like I said, I think if you pick that 04 Pistons team, if you pick that 1999 inexperienced Spurs team, I think that those are two winnable series for this Oklahoma City Thunder team. But overall, let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about this Oklahoma City Thunder team? What do you thought about their utter domination so far in the league? 80 total wins. We haven't seen this in a pretty long while. Do you think that they're going to win this series? How many games do they win it? How do they end up winning this? And where would you rank them amongst all-time teams? Let me know all of that down in the comments below. Make sure to look out for the Indiana Pacers episode tomorrow where we discuss their side of it. And without further ado, that is all for me today, guys. And we'll see you guys on the next one. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, comment down below, share with your friends, follow us on all social medias, add us down below. Peace.